Shockwaves reverberate around the country from Pennsylvania. A would-be assassin's bullet grazed President Trump's ear while two supporters were seriously injured. Another supporter, Corey Compentor, was killed shielding his family. Trump rose up to his feet, raised his fist, and shouted, "Fight," in a picture that is likely to define this point in American history. And today, Trump picked his VP candidate, Junior Senator out of Ohio, J.D. Vance, is going to be his running mate. Trump announced his decision on Truth Social, highlighting his service as a Marine and successes as an author, lawyer, and lawmaker. Vance is expected to be the official Republican vice presidential nominee at the RNC in Milwaukee. And history comes full circle as another bullet failed to end the life of a former president in Milwaukee more than a century ago. Glenn Beck will join us later to explain the gravity of the Trump assassination attempt and the significance of the times in which we live. We have all of those stories and so much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to the chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Monday, July 15th, and the wins just keep coming for Donald Trump. Judge Eileen Cannon has dismissed the classified documents case against the 45th president. In her 93-page decision, Judge Cannon ruled that special counsel Jack Smith was unconstitutionally appointed to the case, and Stu Burguiere, host of BlazeTV's Stu Does America, is here with me now. I mean, if you're Donald Trump, you look at this and you say, okay, this is one heck of a weekend, Stu, for the former president. But now, again, here on Monday, you get this case that is going to be thrown out. So if you're Donald Trump, what are you thinking today?
I mean, it's incredible, right? I mean, this is probably one of the craziest sequences of events that I've ever seen in politics. I mean, 3-4 days ago, all we were talking about was the president's debate performance and whether he was going to get tossed off of the ticket, right? That's not even thought of anymore. You have an assassination attempt against the president, which is like not even enough like to even talk about it that way. If you went into a Hollywood pitch meeting and you were like, I've got an idea for a movie about a presidential assassination attempt where the assassin fires and it just hits his ear. It doesn't hurt him really. It just hits his ear and blood comes out. You get thrown out of the pitch meeting. It's the most insane thing I've ever seen.
He turns his head just so at the very last second to make this possible, where we are talking about an assassination attempt instead of an assassination. And we'll be breaking it down later how this possibly could have happened. Jason Buttrill will join us for all of that. But this weekend is going to go down in history, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody is going to remember where they were. So how do you describe just the overall feeling right now with people online in your community that you see coming through? And it feels a little different today, does it not?
It does. I mean, what you just talked about, that the president could have been assassinated on live television, changes the country forever. And I don't want to know what that looks like, frankly. Thank God the man is okay. Thank God he was able to do this. And the presence of mind in that moment to just have a bullet go through your ear. You're an inch away from dying.
Yeah.
The presence of mind to stand up there and raise your fist and show America that, and your audience and your base, that not only did this not hurt you, but we're going to keep going, is one of the most incredible moments, the most badass moment I've ever seen.
I want to dive into this moment further because I think that only a statesman like Donald Trump, right? He had The Apprentice. He knows what television is like. Yeah. He knows that he should be sending a message to his audience. And the fact that he has a bullet hole now in his ear, right? And that where they're saying that it's all bandaged up, but there's a chunk of his ear missing, according to him, to have the presence of mind to stand up and tell your Secret Service detail to wait so that you can do this. To me, it shows why Donald Trump is not like any other president or presidential candidate that we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, if you're considering voting for Donald Trump and then you see that happen, you're now walking through a wall of fire to do it, right? And I think I also think it's going to hit people outside of the Trump base. I mean, look. Number one, obviously, the most important issue is he okay? Not to mention, the man who actually did die in this. I mean, there's a lot to talk about that's real and serious. And of course, you have the ramifications on the country. Way down the list is politics. I grant you that. But I think you're going to see a real bump for Trump when it comes to the reaction here. It may be short-lived. We're going to see a reversal. Of course, the media is going to all of a sudden forget about all the rhetoric that they're claiming to be nice and calm that they want now. That's all going to go away in the coming weeks. But you do expect people who even, I think, wouldn't consider voting for Trump crossing that line for the first time, because there is something really, truly American about how we react to something like that and the way he reacted, which was, screw you. No, you're not going to do this. You're going to try to take out our presidential candidate? Screw you. I think I would feel the same way if they were trying to take out a Democratic presidential candidate. There'd be a part of me that was just like, wait a minute, I don't like that guy's policies, but I'm still an American. We get to make these choices, not you.
We were looking at all the stories that were coming out from over the weekend, and NBC News had a story last year about Tucker Carlson and others saying that they were, it was a conspiracy theory when they said we were heading towards a potential Trump assassination. Another conspiracy theory now that simply isn't true because we witnessed the events from the weekend.
Yeah. I mean, you go back and you find the New York Times fantasizing about this in 2018, about what it would be like, how it would go down. They wrote an essay. There are clips of, it was Joe Scarborough from just last year where he's talking about, if the president becomes president again, President Trump, that he would just be executing people however he wanted to. What do you think? What signal does that send to people? You call somebody Hitler over and over and over again. It's going to create an impression among some unstable people that the correct moral thing to do is to take him out. I mean, if you think about actually Hitler, what happens to people who try to assassinate Hitler? Tom Cruise makes movies about them, right? These people are praised. When you try to take out Hitler, it's generally viewed as a good thing. We look at those people morally, positively throughout history. Instead, now we have a situation where this person who obviously is not Adolf Hitler is feeling the ramifications of all of this rhetoric. And it's disgraceful. And it's almost like you have this 48-hour window where the media is going to pretend they're nice and not do it anymore. But that's changing.
And we saw Joe Biden come out 3 different times and give speeches. It took him a while for the first one, and now he's making up for it for getting that second speech and third speech in. And he's trying to make sure that the rhetoric is toned down, which is what we would need out of a leader in the White House. I don't care what you think about Joe Biden. That is what was needed to be said from the White House this weekend. The unfortunate part is that we aren't seeing that rhetoric toned down yet.
It's not real. It's not real at all. I mean, even the speech that he made, he did this thing where he was going to say, look, we need political violence to end on both sides. That's a good instinct. You should say that. The way you actually do that is you give examples. Maybe you give examples from both sides. He went through a list of examples. Every one he pulled out was something that you could theoretically blame on the right. It was January 6th, the Michigan kidnapping potentially of Governor Whitmer, the harassing of election officials. He went on and on and on. Couldn't come up with Kavanaugh almost being assassinated. Couldn't come up with a baseball park shooting. Steve Scalise and that whole situation where, if those agents were not there, 10% of elected Republicans in Washington, D.C. could have been murdered.
Yeah, if Steve Scalise specifically wasn't there, he was the only one with a security detail there that day. So if Steve decided, I'm not going to play baseball today,
it's over for all these other people. You can't remember any example. This was not an Oval Office speech the way it was supposed to be done. This was a campaign speech. This was a guy trying to transition from, I know the other day was bad for my campaign, I better figure out a way to get out of it. I thought it was honestly disgraceful, Jill.
Well, it was disgraceful, Stu. You are absolutely right. But the good news is that at least on the right, we are seeing some unity and people being brought together because Trump's assassination attempt is bringing people together in Milwaukee. That is coming up next. Trump is riding his legal victory all the way to Milwaukee, where he's expected to become officially the Republican nominee for president. Chris Bedford, the senior political editor for Washington correspondent for Blaze News, is there. And Chris, in your Beltway brief at theblaze.com, you say a number of unlikely names are going to be at the RNC. Everybody from Nikki Haley to 50 Cent. So is it coming off of this assassination attempt this weekend? Is this actually becoming a unifying event for the right?
Can you believe it? I mean, the Republicans were already set to walk into this week more unified than the Democratic Party by an absolute long shot. But the historic, deadly attack and the attempted assassination that we watched on television on Saturday has even heightened that so much. The Democrats are completely despondent. Republicans are completely obsessed. The kind of nerd prom that is generally a convention in the first place has become a top ticket. People flying in, people trying to get in, people trying to find hotel rooms. It's changed the face, and you've got, the war-loving corporatist wing of the GOP is ready to play ball with people like Nikki Haley. And you have 50 Cent, who had been dabbling with Republicanism for some time now, putting Donald Trump's face on an album during a concert, releasing an endorsement, and reaching out to folks in Jason Aldean's camp. He's got a concert planned for Thursday to try and see if he can jump on that and even carve out a speaking slot, which is possible because even though this thing has been being planned for months, it is quite chaotic here right now.
I noticed that Chris used 50 Cent while Jill correctly said 50 Cent, and I just want to make sure that's known to the audience. Chris,
my brother used to work for him, too.
Oh, there you go. Wow, that's even worse. Chris, what is the buzz around there on the J.D. Vance pick?
The first person I talked to about the J.D. Vance pick was apoplectic because he said that it would mean we couldn't fight forever war with Russia anymore. But everyone else I've seen is thrilled with this decision. I mean, there was a lot of different options here, and Donald Trump over the last couple weeks and his campaign managers have been really working to try and broaden his appeal. You saw some watering down and changes to the Republican platform for that. That's why there was talks about Glenn Youngkin and his appeal to suburban white women, essentially, or even Governor Huckabee Sanders. These were the people that were thought of. Doug Burgum, who Rupert Murdoch, no friend of Donald Trump, has been really pushing, and who's definitely kind of represents a more moderate, classically liberal 2010 wing of the Republican Party. What J.D. Vance does is an absolute shot to the base, as if they even needed anything more. I think a lot of voters right now, even though they are confident Trump would win, all over broken glass just to cast their vote. But what choosing Vance does, a young senator, 39, in his first term, a rising star, telegenic, intelligent, it allows the MAGA movement to know that there's some kind of future. A potential successor after Trump's second term in office, if he wins, will be lined up in J.D. Vance. And also, it does signify a final end to Donald Trump's mean ban on facial hair.
There it is. The important things. You know what? You say everybody is on board outside of the one person that you talked to with J.D. Vance. Not everybody on Twitter, though, Chris, agrees with you, because earlier today when J.D. Vance was announced, America's Hitler and Trump's VP were also trending on Twitter at the same time. So they must have missed Biden's call for unity over the weekend there on Twitter.
Yeah, the J.D. Vance excites strong feelings. He's not just a stand-in politician, one who mouths off MAGA things. You saw a lot of this. After Donald Trump won in 2016, a lot of Republicans started to jump on the populist bandwagon. But when it actually came down to votes, or especially when he was out of power, you didn't see that sort of thing carried out. Vance is broken with some of that. Since he came to Washington, he's done bills that really tick off some of the old Tea Party conservatives, like regulating trains after a town in Ohio was essentially exploded by a train crash. He's had a foreign policy that's deeply researched and one that is antagonistic to the Republican Party's kind of broader hawkish position that they've had, really represented by people like Mitch McConnell. He's someone who is not just a fill-in politician who appeals to a certain part of the electorate. He's someone who's actually got ideas. And when you have ideas, you're going to make some enemies.
Chris, I think what's interesting about this pick is as opposed to what he did in 2016, where he kind of picked out of a position of weakness. He was worried about the evangelical wing and whether they would come along for the vote. This is different. It seems like a pick that from a position of strength. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, that's a great point. In 2016, evangelicals were suspicious. Constitutional conservatives and the old Tea Party conservatives, movement conservatives, were suspicious of Donald Trump, even though they'd love to see what he was doing on the debate stage, and they liked some of his policies. He didn't seem like he was, one of them. Then the pick of Mike Pence really got those people calm. And this was not known who the VP was going to be. I was with a top member of Vance's staff on Saturday. He was helping me move some furniture at my house when my wife feels down Donald Trump's been shot. And we're halfway up the stairs with this 200-pound piece of furniture. We get up there, and at that point, they didn't know. It was completely in the dark. Donald Trump has treated this like a game of Apprentice. Some other people, like in Rubio's staff, have been confident for weeks that they were going to get this. But most people have been largely in the dark. And now that's the kind of the way that Donald Trump operates. It's the way he ran his TV show. It's the way he even likes to solicit advice, even from the Oval Office. And the strength he gained from this Saturday assassination attempt, and the strength he gained from the judge dismissing the special agent's case against him, combined to 3 days of pretty powerful positions, and he's able to make calls that he wants.
What's the mood like there right now, Chris? We see the Trump 2024 sign behind you, people all around right there at the convention. What's it like for the average people that are there right now trying to figure out, this is 3 days off of the Trump assassination attempt?
For much of the day, the mood has been extremely hot, oppressive. A lot of people lost trying to figure out where to get their passes, and this and that. Well, the delegates have been in the halls casting a lot of their votes. Now, all the states throw different parties for their delegations, and they have different receptions and events. And probably 5 minutes before we went on the air, what appears to have been a plastic cup margarita session emptied right onto this square. So the mood went from quiet and reporters chasing folks down to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, thousands of people streaming out in festive moods, holding those plastic green cups.
Well, it's one thing to have all of the margarita cups out there, but it's another thing where our Blaze Media national correspondent Julio Rosas has been dealing with all of the protesters. I know he has sent in some footage. Let's take a look at what's going on in the streets of Milwaukee right here with all of the chaos. Everything is happening. Stu, when you see this, they are chanting again. They did not get the memo. When you see that they're still out there just trying to say right. Trump's Hitler, all the rhetoric is still inflamed. It's still going on. So what's it going to take for all the protesters to just realize, like, hey, we're 3 days away from this, what could have been incredibly tragic incident. What will it take for them?
Well, half of them were on Twitter cheering it on as it was going on. So, I mean, it was very, very disturbing. I think it's fascinating to watch their approach here, though, because you'd think there's going to be at least a little bit of a quiet time, right? A little bit of a moment where they realize, hey, we're in a serious situation as a country. Maybe this isn't the time for all the Hitler commentary. But I will say the vast majority of the campaign that is going on right now and has been for months and months and months from Democrats was basically based on three things. Donald Trump is Hitler, January 6th, and they're the violent party, and then abortion. And if you look at those three things, how can you do two of them right now? Right. How can you say Donald Trump is the violent one? How can you try to get people fired up about January 6th when the opposing candidate was almost murdered on live television? You go back to the third thing, we're going to be hearing a lot about abortion over the next few months, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, and we have Julio Rosas now with us back in Milwaukee. I want to ask you, Julio, we've been talking about the protesters right here. So can you paint a picture of what it's like happening on the ground right now?
Yeah, so the protesting march on the RNC, it did conclude about a couple hours ago. They had their press conference where they were denouncing, obviously, because this is a far left coalition, denouncing Trump because, Jill, last week I was telling you that a lot of these groups have been focusing on Biden the past couple months because of the war in Gaza, but because Biden has been underperforming, and now with the unfortunate assassination attempt on President Trump and his popularity rising in the aftermath, they're really starting to realize that they're going to probably have to be focusing on Trump for the next couple months, and especially if he wins after November. And one thing that was interesting is that one of the speakers did say that, generally speaking, she was against any assassination attempt on any politician, but then she caveated that by saying, but it's undeniable that Trump's rhetoric, policies, and actions has led to the legitimization of political violence by white nationalists. That's what she was saying. And of course, as someone who has covered an untold number of far-left violent protests, I can obviously say that's not true. But that's the mood. That's where they're kind of seeing themselves at the forefront of all this. And now that the main protest is over, they are going to be mobilizing, and we're going to see a pretty big turnout for the DNC in Chicago next month.
Yeah, what else do you expect to see coming up here the rest of the week in Milwaukee?
So because, obviously Milwaukee is a bit of a liberal town, right? It's one of the reasons why Wisconsin trends blue. I would say that today was the main event in terms of the protests. And I think, again, that's just because they're so focused on Biden and they're really focusing on Chicago, and they're going to put a lot more resources and dedication to that event. So obviously, anything can happen for the rest of the week, especially with the security concerns. But I would guess, and I would say that in terms of a far left acting out here in Milwaukee, I think that's not going to be an issue moving forward.
I hope that it is not an issue moving forward. I think that we've had our fair share of excitement for the entire week. If we could just, keep everything very calm and collected, that would be very much appreciated. Julio, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We would like to thank Patriot Mobile for providing the Wi-Fi that is making this broadcast possible all convention long. And they want to thank you for supporting us with a special offer. So go to patriotmobile.com/RNC24 for a free month of service. And the Trump rally attendees say that they saw red flags long before shots rang out. You don't want to miss it. Secret Service and local authorities have come under scrutiny following a near-fatal attempt on President Trump's life. Some attendees even claimed that they tried to warn security about the threat before the shooting. Jason Buttrill is a U.S. Marine, former intelligence analyst of the Department of Defense, and head writer and researcher for the Glenn Beck Program. So, Jason, after the shooting, a Trump supporter told BBC News that he tried to warn Secret Service multiple times before shots rang out. We have that video. Let's take a look.
We noticed a guy crawling, bear crawling up the roof of the building beside us, 50 feet away from us. So we're standing there, we're pointing at the guy crawling up the roof.
And he had a gun, right?
He had a rifle. We could clearly see him with a rifle. Absolutely. We're pointing at him. The police are down there running around on the ground. We're like, hey, man, there's a guy on the roof with a rifle. And the police were like, huh, what? Like they didn't know what was going on. We're like, hey, right here on the roof. We can see him from right here. We see him. He's crawling. And next thing you know, I'm thinking to myself, why is Trump still speaking? Why have they not pulled him off the stage? I'm standing there pointing at him for 2-3 minutes. Secret Service is looking at us from the top of the barn. I'm pointing at that roof, just standing there like this. And next thing you know, 5 shots ring out.
So you're certain that the shots came from that guy on the roof?
100%. 100%.
And he was up there for a couple of minutes.
He was up there.
You saw him up there for a couple of minutes.
Absolutely. At least 3 to 4 minutes.
And you were telling police in the Secret Service.
We were telling the police. We were pointing at him for the Secret Service, who were looking at us from the top of the barn. They were looking at us the whole time when we were standing by that tree.
Could they see
binoculars?
Could they see him?
Probably not, because the roof, the way the slope went, he was behind where they could see. But why is there not Secret Service on all of these roofs here?
I think he makes an excellent point. Why are there not Secret Service members on all of these roofs here, Jason? How is this normie in a better position to break down what actually happened than the Secret Service right now?
This is the perfect example of how ridiculous and how chaotic this entire security operation was. And I'll explain that here in a second. I'll just tell you that I've actually worked alongside Secret Service across a couple of different presidents, including some governor visits that some presidents showed up to. I've been in the planning stages, the execution stages, all of it. And I cannot fathom how this happened. And this guy which, I mean, it's a serious situation, but it cracks me up because he's like the guy that's like at the tailgate party, dyed his hair to match his MAGA hat, probably had something painted on his belly.
Oran McIntyre said he's the redheaded Guy Fieri. Yeah. He's Flavortown. That's what he looks like.
Yeah. He was probably shotgunning beers, and that's why he looked up as he was shotgunning it and saw, the shooter. Like, everybody saw this guy, but the people that needed to see this guy, which is a big problem because I was just reading on ABC just a few minutes ago that was the staging point for law enforcement. So they never thought, what's that like climbing noise on the roof? Or maybe we should, I don't know, look up, everyone. These are very, very basic principles when you go through a protective operation for a principal as a high level as a president of the United States. And just real quick, if I have the time, I'll just go through it really quick just to give some context on how it's supposed to go.
Yeah, please do.
So maybe we can figure out what actually happened. But when this happens, the Secret Service will show up weeks in advance. They'll go to the location, they'll do a site survey, and they'll set up a multi-tiered security plan for it. So they'll be like right up by the stage, they'll be like the people that are the most trusted. They're like family, friends, maybe people on the campaign, those types of people. Then the next tier, and they'll have like a wristband or a lanyard that like shows that they belong in that area, will be like high-level donors, people like that. Maybe media people that they like, that they'll invite over to come see. Then after that, will be another tier of pretty trusted type individuals, and you'll have people outside, like in the bleachers and all that. They'll set that standard right during the advance. They'll also look at, okay, that's like our inner perimeter, which you'll hear, I think the Secret Service director was actually talking about their perimeter, and they're not, responsible outside that perimeter, which is total horse crap, by the way, because they'll also set outside that perimeter firing positions where potential snipers could be set up as. So, for instance, the roof for the sniper, that's the most obvious place for a sniper. They'd probably label that sniper position Alpha. Or the next one over there's another building, Bravo, Charlie, on and on and on. But they would have designated those areas. So when game day shows up, the president is there, they've got rifles and eyes on every single one of those positions. Not only that, but they've got a full-on law enforcement security detail on every single one of those positions, making sure, it's not random dude with his head, hair painted to match his MAGA cap. He's the one while shotgunning a beer accidentally looks up and sees this guy. Law enforcement should have saw him long before that happened.
Yeah,
long before.
You went through your extensive experience in this world. Let me give you my resume. I'm an idiot. I'm just a moron with eyes, and a moron with the very lowest level of common sense. And if I'm looking at that area, the first thing I'm thinking of, if I have to say, if someone's going to assassinate the president, where are they coming from? I'm going to pick that literal building. Yeah. I just don't understand how, one way of preventing some guy of climbing up with a rifle is to have an officer up there already. That's all you have to do, and then the person doesn't come up. It's the most obvious step. How is it possible that there wasn't somebody up there preventing this before it happened?
Yeah, there's multiple questions that need to be asked and answered on this. A lot of explanation, but I've picked out 3 that I think need to be answered immediately with full transparency. One, was the Secret Service plan done in the way I described? They have the multi-tier system with different levels of access, with badges, identification, all that stuff. 2, did they identify those sniper positions, those firing positions, specifically that one, which is the most obvious?
Most obvious.
Yeah, which I'm assuming they would. I'm assuming they would. But then the second question, were law enforcement guarding those areas? Were they denying access? Which we know they weren't at that point. Why? Why were they not at that point? Were they complacent? Were they Trump fans? And were they just like looking at the speech instead? Were they the opposite? Were they not Trump fans? Did not care if someone might harm the president? Third question is the most scary. Were any of them involved in helping this person get to that location? I can't imagine, because there was a CNN report that said this guy was known, right? They had picked him out, law enforcement had picked him out as someone suspicious. And they said, let's keep walking around that day. Let's keep an eye on him. Well, you just stopped at some point and he carried this rifle?
They said he wandered off. And I said, well, that's not a good enough answer.
You're supposed to know where he wanders to?
Yeah.
You have high standards.
The guy with the gun.
Yeah.
Maybe we should keep an eye on
Gosh, you're
that.
so picky.
So, okay, we not only had the failures, the breakdowns with what we're talking about here, obviously the shooter up on the roof, but then you see what's happening with Trump's security detail around him. And we see the several females that are around him that are not tall enough to protect him, to cover his body. You get to the point where they eventually start moving him off of the stage. And then I see, Jason, one of the females doesn't know how to holster her gun. And the other female, we're not doing so well right now, the ladies. The other female goes around, and once they get to the SUV is like, oh, let me put my sunglasses back on. You know what I'm not doing? I'm not taking time to try and put my sunglasses on when I'm trying to save the president.
Yeah. I think at one point, one of those officers did a complete 360 and turned all the way around. It was absolutely nuts.
Unreal.
So for the body group, for one, they should have put their foot down immediately when they heard that there was a suspicious person, possibly with a gun, in the area. They should have stopped the president from even taking the stage. Every other standard operating procedure in every level of executive protection would say we're not bringing the client out at that point. They would say, I'm sorry, you need to get eyes on that guy or our guy is not coming out. That's basic. The Secret Service knows better. They should have done that. That's basic. Second of all, the way they reacted, I've never seen that before. It was so chaotic. I worked for a private executive protection company that handled a lot of high-end people, including Glenn, including RFK Jr., same company. And they would not hire probably 90% of the agents that were on that stage looking to protect the president at that point. Would not. They would not have made it through any kind of vetting process or any kind of training. They would not have made it. That's at a private level. These are people protecting the president, the former president and future president of the United States. What the hell is happening over there? I tell you one thing is that the Secret Service head, I can never remember her name, Kimberly Cheadle, or that's what it was. Right at the top, I think it's like the second paragraph in her bio at the Secret Service website, is she's very proud of making it one of her prime directives to have a very inclusive workforce. Now,
I'm glad that's what we're concerned about.
When you're concerned about numbers, and so this is not an anti-female. I've personally worked with female executive protection officers that had bigger arms than I do and probably could outlift me. So there are females out there.
That's not saying much.
That's true. But they put in the work and they actually got there and they could do it just as well as any man could. This is not a female thing. Yeah. But when you're concerned with numbers, that's what you get. You get Melissa McCarthy out there trying to protect the president.
Unfortunately, we are going to have more questions than answers, and we will continue to break this down, obviously, going forward. But when we come back, Glenn Beck will be joining us, and he'll explain how another former president and the country withstood an assassin's bullet when we return. The site of the RNC has become ironic in light of recent events. In 1912, President Teddy Roosevelt survived a would-be assassin's bullet in Milwaukee while giving a campaign speech. Glenn Beck is the host of the Glenn Beck Program and co-founder of Blaze Media, and he joins me now. So, Glenn, the location of Roosevelt's assassination attempt is eerie enough, but what are some of the other parallels that you see with his life attempt and Donald Trump's from over the weekend?
So it is really interesting to me. By the way, hi, I love your show. It's interesting to me that the way Donald Trump handled the assassination attempt is almost identical to what Teddy Roosevelt did. Most people will know the phrase, it takes more than that to kill a bull moose. The actual phrase was, it takes more than one bullet to kill a bull moose. Teddy Roosevelt was running for what would be a third term because McKinley was assassinated and he was the vice president. And so he took over McKinley's first term. Then he was reelected to a second term. And then in 1912, he decides to run again. And he is the spoiler because the Republican is already been chosen and Woodrow Wilson is running as a Democrat. And Theodore Roosevelt decides to run as a Bull Moose Party, the Progressive Party candidate. So he comes into town. He's supposed to give a big speech at the auditorium. And he comes into town and he's driving in. He has dinner. These are Teddy Roosevelt's spectacles, by the way. He has dinner. He gets back into the car afterwards and he's going to the auditorium. He takes his glasses and he puts them in this case. Now, these are Teddy Roosevelt's glasses and his case, but not the one that he carried that night. He then put this case, which has a steel backing on it, into his pocket, along with a speech that he had, which was 50 pages. And he folded it like this, and he put that in his overcoat pocket as well. So he's walking outside, and there's this guy who believes that McKinley's ghost had come to him and said, you got to kill Roosevelt because he was responsible for my death, and he shouldn't run for a third term because he's not George Washington, because nobody ran more than 2 terms because of George Washington. So as he's getting into the car, he's shot by this guy. Mr. President, he turns, shoots him right here in the chest. As he gets into the car, people tackle the guy. He's thrown into the car. They start to drive away, and that's when somebody notices the bullet hole in his jacket. And Theodore Roosevelt puts his hand in by his shirt and comes out, and his hand is all bloody. He didn't realize it because it didn't go into his lungs. It lodged between 2 ribs because the speech and his glasses caught that bullet. He died years later with that bullet still lodged in his chest. But he went on to give the speech. The doctors said, please don't. We've got to get you to the hospital. He was bleeding profusely. He said, and I quote, I don't care a rap about being shot, not a rap. He said, I'm going to give my speech. He goes on stage. He's got his coat on. And at one point he said that he had turned down the doctors to take him to the hospital. He said, I'm going to ask you to be very quiet. Please excuse me for making a long speech, but I'll do the best that I can because, well, you see, there's a bullet in my body, but I'm not hurt badly. Somebody just tried to shoot me. Well, nobody really believed him until he held up the pages of his speech first. And this is a page of that actual speech. Let me put something behind it so you can see where it had been folded. These are the bullet holes in that speech. And he went on to give almost a 90-minute speech. The doctors tried to stop him from giving the speech twice on stage where he got a little lightheaded. And he just looked at them and said, I'm going to finish the speech. Leave me alone. He did. He finished the speech, and then he went to the hospital. So when Donald Trump got up and he said, wait, and then he looked at the crowd and held his fist up and he said, fight, I immediately thought of Theodore Roosevelt. I just think the parallels are incredible. And it was, on the way to be nominated for his party's candidate to be president of the United States, just like now Donald Trump is there in Wisconsin again to be nominated for president of the United States.
When I look at Donald Trump and Teddy Roosevelt, the first thing that comes to my mind is, you know Donald Trump better than most. He never backs away from a fight, right? That's what Teddy Roosevelt is known for. And,
Right.
If Trump ever needed another reason to go, another list there by his name, this weekend is absolutely going to be there solidifying his legacy for the American people on par with a Teddy Roosevelt.
I think he is, you want to talk about somebody who's not a politician, really doesn't like to be a politician. Roosevelt really liked being a politician. I don't think Trump does. He's more of a businessman and a showman. He likes the attention. He likes the stage work, but he doesn't like the fact that his family has been dragged through the mud. His family has been dragged into court. He has been dragged into court as well. Look at what he has, the cost, the high price that he has paid to be president. Why would you do that unless you just have nothing else in your life, which Donald Trump does have many things in his life he could turn to, or you really believe it. And I think you saw the determination when he sat in court and just took it day in and day out and said, I'm fighting for you. What they're doing to me, they'll do to you. He really believed it. This, I think, has changed him even more. I talked to Selena Zito, who spoke to him yesterday morning, and she said that she thought a road to Damascus moment had happened with Donald Trump. He is convinced, and so am I, that was divine providence. I talked to the world's greatest sniper on radio today, and I said, have you ever had a shot that close and had somebody turn their head and it misses? And he said, never. He said, that's a miracle. And I think Donald Trump has answers to a higher calling now. It's not just about him being president and serving the American people. I think that he has, there's a good possibility that he has fundamentally changed as a man and is now more determined than ever.
I completely agree with you. And we now know the full ticket for Donald Trump on the VP slot will be filled by J.D. Vance. Your thoughts? I saw you tweet out earlier that you think this is going to be one of those things that allows Donald Trump to continue his legacy. J.D. Vance is one of the most MAGA senators out there right now.
You know, it's really interesting because they say that Donald Trump is so vengeful and everything else. No, he's not. J.D. Vance was not a supporter of Donald Trump's for a very long time. He's changed his mind, just like I changed my mind on Donald Trump after watching him. And now he's being embraced. He is a pick that I think, you know, it was very important for the president to pick the next president, really, because you have 4 years now, and you can't get anything done in 4 years. It's almost impossible to do it in 8 years. But if J.D. Vance plays his cards right and Donald Trump does what I hope he's going to do, and restores the Constitution and the constitutional powers, I think we could be looking at 12 years. And to see Donald Trump recognize that he has 4 years and he needs somebody to not be George H.W. Bush to Trump's Reagan, he needs somebody to actually believe in what he's doing and will continue on. To me, I thought that showed a humility. You could interpret this, as I do, as Donald Trump saying, I know I'm only going to be there 4 years. Everything you say I'm going to do about never leave the office is not true. I have 4 years, and that's why I picked him. I think it was a really good move.
I want to switch gears with you now because you have a new book coming out, and it's your first young adult novel. It's called Chasing Embers, and it comes out next week. And Glenn, I've read it, and I think that it ties actually so well into the times that we're living in now because it's about knowing our history. And if you don't know your history, you're going to be doomed to repeat all of the bad things, or they're going to take out the things that we do want to continue and the traditions that we should be keeping forward.
So I thank you for reading it. Are you enjoying it?
I love it. I think it's very much in the vein of a Hunger Games where you can see this as a series. It's very much going to give young readers something to be excited about. I love it.
Yeah, good. I'm glad. It is, to me, it is important to get into the culture. I've never written a book for young adults before. Michaela, who works for me, she is also the co-author of this book. I gave her the storyline, and then we worked together on fleshing it all out, and we've got, I think, 7 or 8 books in as sequels for it. if this is successful. But it has to go in to the culture. It has to be taught in a different way. You know, I was really sad on Saturday after the president was shot. We were having a family reunion here. And so there were about 30 of my relatives here and the kids. And I decided to talk about the history of our country and show them some of the artifacts like I just did with Theodore Roosevelt, and share with them the principles that we all share. And one of the kids, probably in the 4th grade, said, "We're not taught any of that." And all of the adults said the same thing. I didn't know that. It is so critical to know why we're a republic and not a democracy. It seems like just semantics, but it's not. And if we don't learn our history, we will lose it. And Saturday, I don't know if people really realized that could have been the end of the republic as we know it. We could have gone into civil war. We could have gone into a lockdown of some sort. I mean, we're in a very dangerous place. So what is it that we're fighting for? It's not for Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is not fighting for the office of the presidency. He should be, and I believe he is, fighting for the Constitution and the Republic. And it's a very, very delicate thing. And I hope that people go out and buy this for their kids or their grandkids and give it to them. And don't tell them that it's a history book, but it is. These kids are living in this dystopian world where history has been erased, and they have to find out if the truth even matters, and then what is the truth, and what is the truth worth.
When I was reading this book, I would go through and say, what does it mean if we actually lose the truth and try and get it back? And that was one of the things that I just kept reading through. We have about a minute left here, Glenn. It's not only the children's books, the young adult fiction book that you're writing, but you're also trying to just go out there and restore history. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, we see you with the Teddy Roosevelt artifacts. Why does this mean so much to you?
Because I understood the country for the first time when I was 35 or 40, when I started learning history. I mean, I was not interested in history. I didn't know, I knew the basics, red, white, and blue, and Yankee Doodle and all that stuff. But it wasn't until I actually started looking at the stories and the people that I learned not only who we are, but who we have been, the lessons that we need to learn. We keep making the same mistakes over and over again. And if you could just go back and look and say, no, remember when we did this, we would be able to fix our problems pretty quickly. And I think because of what's happening in the country, what happened over the weekend, I think we're on the verge of winning.
I hope you're right.
All we have to do is remember.
I hope you're right. You can go ahead and buy Chasing Embers now at glennbeck.com. Glenn, thanks so much for being with me.
Thank you.
That will do it for us here on Blaze News Tonight. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/Blaze News Tonight, and we'll see you back here tomorrow night with more.